Well, good mid-morning or good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Collisted. I'm the Public Policy Manager with the Iowa Developmental Disability Council, and we are so glad that you're here. I'm just kind of introducing our speaking lineup. I'll speak a little bit, but Amy Campbell will be doing the primary amount of our conversation, kind of talking about what's going on up at the legislature and what she's seeing as it relates to bills. And I also want to recognize that we have Leanne Smith today with us, our ASL interpreter, and we're glad she's here to make sure that our information is accessible. As we get close to the end of the 2021 legislative session, I just want to pause because we are going to have some additional chats here after this one. But this is kind of getting close to the end of the legislative session, and Amy does such a great job for the Iowa Developmental Disability Council, keeping us abreast of what's going on up at the Capitol, keeping us aware of what bills are being considered that might affect people with disabilities in Iowa, and really keeping us in the loop. She does that through Twitter. She's got a Twitter site. She's got Facebook. She connects with us on Iowa Infonet and also ID Action and also the our own page. And so kind of look out for that. But then she also produces almost a weekly Infonet newsletter, and we'll talk about that at the end. But she's constantly working on behalf of us, and we are so appreciative of that. So I just want to take a second to recognize all the hard work she has done. I think she lives up there for 3 months of the year, if not longer. So Amy, I'll turn it over to you, and we're also glad you're here, everybody.
Thanks, Bill. And everyone, we have fun at the Capitol, right, Bill?
Yes, we do.
At the end. Well, so today, guess what, is the 110th day of the legislative session, and that is supposed to be the last day. It's not. It's nowhere near the last day. It's just simply the last day that legislators get paid. You know, they get expense checks for coming in to the state capitol to live for 3 months out of the year to represent their constituents. So their expense checks end. So that means when they come to Des Moines, they're paying for their own meals, their own hotels, their own gas in their car to get there. So it's a pretty good incentive for legislators that live far away, particularly farmers on days that are like this, when it's 80 degrees out and they want to get the crops in the field to get done with the session. So I think it'll be within the next 2 weeks. I think it'll be hard to get done next week. The biggest challenge is they start to lose legislators next week. There's some that have vacations planned, and then that means they're losing votes. So it could get a little tricky on some of the more controversial bills to have enough votes to pass them. So just a quick review of what's left so you get an idea of why it's going to be hard for them to end quickly. And this is just a broad view of the issues, not necessarily ones you may be interested in or tracking, but they have a big bill on tax cuts that is income taxes, that takes away some of the money that was given to cities and counties to replace property tax cuts. And it's also the bill that takes over the funding for the mental health and disability services system and takes it off of property taxes and moves it to the state. So that big bill is still in negotiation, and that's the one they really have to make a decision on first, because they need to know how much money they're going to cut in taxes to know how much money they have left to spend. So talking about spending, there are 11 budgets they have to pass, and only 2 of them are currently agreed to. The administration regulation budget, which funds a lot of state agencies, and including the Department of Human Rights that has the Commission on the Status of Persons with Disabilities in it. That bill has $100 million in it for broadband or high-speed internet build out. It's simply money grants to internet providers to get the fiber out to all of the areas around the state. So focusing on rural areas, probably some of the older infrastructure in urban areas is that focus. And then transportation, which is really almost all federal money, but it does have public transportation in that that piece as well. And so all those other budgets are still up for negotiations. The standings bill is kind of the last budget bill, and legislators tend to dump a lot of stuff in there because it's the last thing that gets done at the Capitol. And so everything that didn't get done somewhere else gets dumped into that bill. So once you see that bill start moving, you know you're within a day or two of the end of session. They're also trying to do a change in the ethanol standard for fuel, something that's a big deal for farmers and Farm Bureau. Child care was a big issue with the governor. Housing, making more affordable housing available was a big issue for the governor. There's a controversial bill about diversity training, not being able to talk about divisive topics like racism and sexism in ways that are controversial. Some First Amendment rights in schools and universities to make sure people aren't being discriminated against because of their political ideology. There's still an abortion constitutional amendment, which you know that issue is always controversial. A Back the Blue bill, which is basically what they're calling a police, a supportive police bill that protects police in a number of ways and makes rioting up to a Class D felony. So it increases the penalties against rioting. Tort reform, that's the caps on how much you can sue for pain and suffering when you get a health care issue, when a health, like if you get a medical malpractice or something like that. The bottle bill, you know, when you can't return your cans and bottles to the store for that nickel back, they're trying to revamp that. So these are not easy issues, right? And they're all still there waiting for some kind of an agreement. So a lot of those probably won't just get done this year. The things that are done, as we talked about broadband, the policy side of the bill is done. The governor had some education reforms that she really wanted to see, including charter schools and opening up enrollment so that you can go to a different school if you want to. You know, those are done. So there's a couple things that were accomplished, but a lot still on that list for legislators. And more specifically to
Amy?
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing about that, as you guys are kind of thinking about all of those bills that are kind of pending, and I'm going to kind of say what I think is happening, and Amy, you kind of correct me, is that we were up there the other day and both parties were caucusing individually. And so what happens during that time is they're setting their priorities. Some of the conversation that Amy and I had with different people is that right now, even amongst their own caucuses, they're trying to figure out what their top priority is left in these bills. And so independently they're working, then they're going to come together. And so you said, like you said, they might have to, they're going to individually caucus, then come together and figure out collectively what their priorities are. So there are going to be a number of things that are left that don't get addressed. But what we'd probably see over the next few weeks is them trying to identify the top priorities that they think they can work on and then creating the budget for that. That's what is happening, correct?
Yes. And I was just responding to a couple of the questions on there. So if you saw
Yeah.
there. Eric, yes, the Twitter handle is the same as the InfoNet one. So you can get to it from our website if you click on the Twitter icon there. But yeah, that's exactly what's happening, Bill. And it is a terrible time to try to get in contact with your legislators because you really have no idea when they're going to be in caucus and out of caucus. As Bill got lucky, he was going to come up early and then had something come up and then came up, and we thought it was going to be the worst timing, and it turned out to be the best time. So it's kind of hit or miss up there. Well, and one other thing about that. So there is a position in leadership called the whip, like actually a whip, WHIP. And that position is probably the most important position right now because they literally whip their members into shape. They are the person charged with trying to make sure that the people that are waffling on a bill do what their caucus wants them to do. So that's a lot of what they do in those caucuses, those private meetings, is get their members all on the same page before they even go out and talk about an issue. So they tend to do that before they debate every day. Specifically about some of the issues we've been tracking in InfoNet, we're happy to report that the ABLE account bill passed and is on its way to the governor's office. I am going to check and see if there's a bill signing request for that. And if there is, I will, anybody interested in going to that, let us know. I know that there was a group out of Southeast Iowa that was really involved in that whole debate. And so I'm guessing, since this has been a multi-year effort, that they're going to try to get a bill signing. But we will keep you in contact. I just wanted to note that if that was an issue for you, please make sure to let us know. That bill was amended. So what it does, it allows a person with a disability to transfer their special needs trust or supplemental needs trust, those older trusts, over to the newer ABLE accounts, ABLE savings accounts in the Iowa Treasurer's Office. And you'll recall those were authorized about 5 years ago, and they're super flexible. They have high savings caps, so you can save a lot of money for additional needs that may not be covered by Medicaid or other services you get that help you live independently, go to school, work, run a business. It's really flexible on the types of things that it can be used for, and it doesn't affect your ability to continue to receive your other services. So they're really flexible, great opportunities for savings and for families who want to contribute to their loved ones' savings. But an additional piece was added to that so that when a person dies, the account is not subject to recovery from Medicaid. So the expenses that were paid out of Medicaid, the state can't come back and try to collect those from the account. So the account would go to either another person who's eligible for those, or in any other way that's established when you set up that account. So that's a really good addition for individuals, and particularly for those that want to put money in to help their loved ones, but then don't want it all to end up back at the state when it is collected. And that's House File 835. My guess is that it will not be officially sent to the governor until after session ends, since it just had passed a week or two ago. That would mean the governor would have 30 days to sign it and have more time to do a bill signing. So we will let you know more about that. Certainly you can send a message to the governor about that from our Action Center site on the website. Interestingly, we our advocates won on the adult changing stations bill that would have require the DOT, Department of Transportation, to put these changing stations, larger changing stations, in their modern family restrooms that they have at their rest areas along the interstate. That bill did die, but it died because the Department of Transportation agreed to do it voluntarily. So sometimes legislation doesn't have to be passed to get something done. Sometimes that is a way to put pressure on an agency to have that issue addressed. And that happens a lot. Sometimes like with like Medicaid managed care, a lot of legislators are trying to fix things without having to pass a law. They try to fix things by going through their networks and working with the DHS and the managed care companies. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting that when I hit that little slip button on my mouse, it moves the page. The affordable housing. So we've been tracking a lot of affordable housing because we know that's really important part about community-based living. You have to be able to afford the housing in the community to live in your community. And so there have been some initiatives that have been put forth by the governor this year. She was really supportive of passing changes to local housing trust funds. These are accounts that are in several urban areas, and they fund homeless programs, affordable housing programs, support programs, and help people get connected to affordable housing in their community. The governor had recommended that that program no longer be capped at $3 million, but to take that cap off, meaning all of the money that goes into that fund would be available for these local trust funds. So that moves it from 3 million to a little over $8 million. So that's a big jump in the amount of funds going to affordable housing. And those are completely at the discretion of the local area. So the local area decides how they want to spend those dollars. So the House and the Senate have their own plans. The House in House Study Bill, that's what HSB stands for. House Study Bill 274 does what the governor wants. Just takes that cap off and lets all of these funds go into the local service programs. The Senate, however, decided that 8 million was too much. So they just increased the cap to 5.5 million. So they're still increasing the amount of money that's going into these programs, but just not as much. Both of those bills are still haven't passed one chamber or the other yet. Another issue that has been, I think, in the last 3 of our capital chats is the Housing Choice Voucher Discrimination Bill, Senate File 252. That is the bill that says local governments, so cities and counties, can't pass local laws that would require landlords to take, to not consider how a person pays for their rent in the decision of whether to rent for them. So basically, if 3 communities in the state have passed local laws that say you can't discriminate against a person because they're using a federal housing choice voucher to pay for their rent. The landlords won on this. That bill passed, so it would allow the landlords to discriminate against somebody using these vouchers. And that is now at the governor's office. However, it has been sitting there for well over a month, which means they haven't sent it to her yet because she's supposed to sign it within 3 days. So it, to me, this means it's probably going to be vetoed, or they're using this as something to negotiate with. So I know she's getting a lot of emails from people. We still have an action item up on our website that goes directly to this issue. It's already got the language written up. You can modify that if you want, or you can send it as is. But I think the more emails to the governor, the better on that, if that's an issue that's concerning to you. And I will say nationally, 2/3 of the people that use these housing choice vouchers are either people with disabilities or the elderly. So it's a third and a third. A third are people with disabilities, and a third are the elderly.
Amy, just to add on that too, is I'm going to put the action item link in the chat here in a second, but just really encourage people. I know, like you said, on the national level and even in the state level, we know that housing is such a determinant for independence. And that's one of our priorities as the DD Council, is to make sure that people can live in the community of their choice. And if there is an opportunity to have this vetoed, or at least to share that message, this is an important time to hear it. And so I'll put that link in there. It's a really easy way for you to communicate and take action, as our button says, and really encourage you to have your voice heard on that. It is important, and we don't want it to gain any further momentum, because it will further limit the flexibility of housing for people with disabilities. So,
speaking of housing, some of you that have been around a while know, we've had a lot of discussions in the past several years about service animals and companion animals. And so there is a bill this year. It has some people, especially those who represent veterans, that are really concerned about House File 866. That bill is a balancing bill, is what I would call it. There has been some incidences where it's been difficult to determine who you accommodate in a rental environment. So this bill just says that a landlord can offer to move somebody who requests accommodations for a service animal or companion support animal. And so the issue came up. There was a person who had lived in a rental building for a long time, and she had very, very severe allergies to animals, and specifically moved into that building because it was animal free. Then another person with a disability moved in and had a support animal, or moved in and then later requested a support animal. Unfortunately, you can't accommodate both because one person has severe allergies. So they wanted to move the other person who had moved later and wanted the animal, and they refused. So it was kind of one of those things where they didn't know what to do. So that bill allows that to be one of the accommodations. So there's some concerns because you want to make sure those accommodations move you to an equal, not a lesser type of a rental environment. So there's been a lot of discussion about that issue. And then yesterday, a resolution, which is not a law, it's just resolutions are a way that legislators express their support for something, or honor someone who's done something great. They just filed it yesterday, House Resolution 12, making today National Therapy Animal Day. I don't know if they'll act on it or not since it's already passed, but I just thought it was worthy of noting since we were already going to talk about service animals, and make you aware that today is National Therapy Animal Day. Finally, last week, the 2 new bills came out. Probably wondering why some new bills are still coming out. There is leaders in both the House and the Senate are allowed to sponsor joint leadership bills this late in session. And so that's what they did. They introduced House File 889, which is now on the Senate calendar. It passed the House. And it prohibits the government, any agency, any state agency, local agency, schools, from having any kind of ID or passport that would list your COVID-19 vaccination status. The bill also says that businesses can't require that you show proof of vaccination in order to enter their premises. They can still do all the screening and all of that type of stuff, but they can't require proof of vaccination. It does exempt healthcare facilities. So that was something of concern to people who are scared about the vaccine. They don't want to have to be able to be forced to do that in order to go on a cruise or go into a building. I mean, I guess you're not going to go on a cruise here. All the cruise boats are actually requiring those. But there was just some concern that, a school, for instance, I know some of the universities were thinking about requiring vaccination. So those are some of the things that have happened this week. are still out there that we've been watching. Do you guys have any questions about those specifically? Because we'll get a more open discussion in a second. I did want to just post what Bill had said. There is a link. You can ask for a veto of this bill, that housing discrimination one. Did you put the, oh, you did put the link in. Yep. So that's the link. I can show you what this looks like. I think it'll show up on, are you seeing it, Bill?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm gonna have to change my share. Hold on a minute. And I will reshare it. There we go. I just want you to be able to see what it looks like. So that's our action page. See that now, Bill?
Yep.
Okay.
I can see it.
So you can contact your legislators about anything you want. But if on that particular one, you can see that it'll tell you a little bit about this bill, and it has kind of some information you might want to think in writing your text. So if you want to change it and use some of that language, you can, or you can just send it saying, I'm writing to ask you to veto this. I usually tell people, please add some things of why it's important, and then you just put in your name and hit send a message. It's that easy. So that's kind of that's what you'll see when you see our action center. I'm really happy to report, I was just doing right before this meeting our quarterly report, and we've had I think something like 60 advocates use it this quarter, which is really great. That people are starting to use that. It's new from last year. I have a new service, so we've been really excited about that.
Amy, and I would encourage you. You don't always have to. The part of that take action has a direct ask there, asking you to veto that. What I would encourage you to maybe put in there is just a little bit about yourself and why it's important to you. And I think that's what I've recognized this year is as soon as you talk to a legislator, they'll say, oh, where are you from? You know, why is this important? You'll want to know your personal connection. And so it's really easy to write, I'm Bill, I'm from Des Moines, and, you know, I work for Iowa DD Council, or, you know, I have a family member, or I'm a loved one, or I am someone that this might directly affect. That really sends a message, that personal connection. So it doesn't have to be long, just a simple sentence of, here's who I am, because then it personalizes that for them. So
yep, I always say personalize it as much as you can. You don't have to say a lot. In fact, it's better if you don't say too much. I mean,
yep,
say enough that they can read it and understand why it's really important to you. I'm gonna move over here. Kind of before we move into this stuff, are there other things that people want to talk about or ask questions? I haven't talked about the budget or anything. We put that out in InfoNet last week, but I can answer questions about that, or other things on your mind before we kind of show you a few other things. We got a little short video that Bill
Here's
made.
A few ways to communicate. Go ahead, and if you put your hand up, I can call on you and we can make sure you're unmuted if you can't do that yourself. I'm not sure. Or put it in the chat and we'll kind of address them as we go along. That's a second way to do it. Or if you can unmute yourself, you can start to talk. And so any way of those ways, just feel free. And this is supposed to be a back and forth as much as we possibly can make it with over 40 people in here. So.
This is George Barr from Cedar Falls. May I make a couple, 3 comments and then a question, please?
Sure, George, that'd be great. Good to see you.
Yeah. First of all, Rick sending my regards and hope for a happy retirement.
We will do that.
Also, 2 comments. One is I think a 110-day limit on a legislative session is unrealistic in the first place. My second comment is I like that the state will be paying for mental health problems, but considering how stingy the state can be sometimes, I think there should be still a county supplement. And my question is there anything you want me to pass on to people up here like Jenny Allen or Mary McCauley or anything like that?
Bill, do you have ideas to pass on?
I think you could, the things that we highlighted today, I think are kind of top of mind as I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the housing issue as a concern that they might be able to influence, or they may know who their connection is, and that would be important. And I think the second thing is that savings with that Iowa Able. Another comment that I would say about the Iowa Able Act that I was going to mention later is that I have also heard that another advocacy point that people are really looking at, and we heard a little bit about this last week at the disability seminar, which was at the national level, was about the age limit. And the Iowa Able right now has it that you have to have that disability before the age of 26. And people see that as an important vehicle for independence for people with disabilities. And instead of creating a different way of doing it, that would be one. So those would be the top of mind that I'm having. I also asked Brooke if she had some other things on her mind as well. So she's kind of nodding no.
Well,
one further comment. The company that owns my apartment building has let me use Section 8 voluntarily.
That's great, George. I think there are a lot of good, there are a lot of landlords out there that don't discriminate. You've just seen a couple communities, I think it's Iowa City, Marion, and Des Moines have had to do it because of some issues. But I think you probably don't see it happening in a lot of areas just because you don't have the problems. But it's a community option right now to do that. I would also say if Jenny, I mean, you guys have always been so active, and Brooke and Bill have been offering help to coordinate and organize local Capitol days, since we didn't have those at the Capitol this year. Or virtual legislative forums with organizations, or kind of moving to maybe even in person. So if they're wanting to do something, I would, and I know you guys are always so active with your legislators. I think that's another opportunity to share with Jenny that the DD Council is doing to help continue to have those direct one-on-ones with legislators.
Hey, George, I'm going to jump in.
But it's too late this year to have them?
No.
Yep, absolutely not, George. In fact, this summer is really a good time to have these meetings once the legislative session ends, because they have a little bit more time on their hands.
Okay. Now, I haven't talked to Jenny other than leaving messages on her office phone for a month, so I don't know. She's kind of busy with her job and such, so I don't know how interested she is in getting involved in this.
Yep, just another option. I did want to bring up, Lonnie had asked questions for an update on Senate File 587, and that is the tax bill. That's the big Senate tax bill that includes, in the very first division of that tax bill, is the changes to the mental health and disability services regions. And as you will recall, that starts to take all of the property taxes out of the system and replace them with state dollars. So it would start, the bill as written would start this July, which I think is a little too aggressive. And I think even legislators are thinking that might be So what I will say is they are in active negotiations about that. The issue is timing, because they're not sure they can do it that quickly. Secondly, how the House is very concerned about making sure that the commitment that the state makes is solid, is as solid as you can possibly be with legislators, because as those of you that have been around a while know, the states all promised a lot of times to pay for different things and then backed out of those promises. So the House really wants to make sure that they're not going to allow people to back out of something as important as mental health services when you don't, disability services, when you don't have property tax dollars in there, which are locally controlled and decided. The third issue is kind of just operational issues. There's a lot of things in there, timing, the inability of regions to have any money in the bank, really. They're allowed to have 5% of money in cash reserves, but that's really not a lot of money to pay for bills. So that could cause delays to provider payments or delays to services. So there's some kind of operational issues they're trying to work through. And then there's a concept of the risk pool where if you didn't get enough money through the state appropriation, you could go and ask for additional money. So that was specifically set up for like Polk County and Scott County, those counties that have had, or regions that have had difficulty getting enough money to pay for the services. The House does not like the risk pool idea. They would rather just see the money go where it needs to go. So how they do that is a big question. So that's a lot of things to kind of work on in the next 2 weeks. But they have to make a decision on that first before budgets come. So still being talked about, but nothing really public yet.
Amy, just to add maybe to that, and then also to kind of round out an answer to George's question, I should have thought of this first, but the two legislative priorities, well, we have three as the Iowa Developmental Disability Council, and two are really related around funding. And the second is around a stable, trained, and appropriate workforce. I've heard recently in the last few weeks that because of the federal match, there is money that is going to be right now kind of designated for services for people with disabilities. I heard yesterday on a Zoom call that that there was a proposed 11% increase for agencies for rates, and then some additional money to be passed directly to caregivers to kind of try to stabilize the workforce. So I think those are two really big important things. There is going to be some decisions made around the funding, that there is a federal match coming through, and so there is money. And as one representative said, they haven't always had that opportunity to address deficits because there hasn't been additional money. And so this year, I think there is some. And then the second piece around, the need for caregivers. I saw that Tucker's on the phone call here, or he's listening in, and he did a great job kind of summarizing the need of the individuals that are in the community receiving services and how important that is. And so I think that's a really easy thing to go to the Take Action Center where it says check with your legislator. I always try to plug how our website works, but you can find your legislator and find out what committees they are. You can influence them regardless, even if they're not on the main committee that addresses some of those issues. But if they are, they certainly need to hear from you. And so those would be two things I'd lift up to everybody on the phone call is caregivers as a priority, and then also money going towards services for people with disabilities so they can stay in their home. You don't have to get into the details. They can figure some of those things out, but just letting them know that those are things that are on top of your mind if you're looking for suggestions. I've got them. So.
Well, thank you. I'm actually a semi-friend to Bob Kresick, so I talk to him occasionally. And Jenny sort of knows the new state senator from up here who replaced Jeff Danielson. But I've got to sign off because I've got other things to do. Thank you.
Good
Thanks, George.
Eric asked about Senate File 461, which is, thank you for saying what it was because I don't remember the numbers anymore, but this is the bill that has only county elected officials voting on the Mental Health and Disability Services Regional Governing Board. That was something really important when they originally drafted the redesign, because it's tax money that's being spent, and they wanted only people that were elected by elected officials to be able to vote on how to use tax dollars. That had to, they wanted to clarify that because there was a problem in one region. My understanding is that bill's just sitting on the House calendar. It's available and ready for debate when they want to bring it up, but they're waiting to see what decision is made on the other bill. Because obviously, why would you limit who can vote if you no longer have any local tax dollars in the system? So I think that's kind of in a holding pattern right now, but it's still there, still able to vote. And if they bring it up, it would go right to the governor after that. Bill mentioned budgets. I just wanted to bring up a couple of highlights from the budgets. This is an incredible budget year, actually. The budgets are looking really good. On the Health and Human Services budget, the House has $18.1 million of increases in home and community-based service waiver and habilitation provider rates. That's like a 3%, I think, increase in their reimbursement rates. The Senate has $8 million for both of those. So there's a big difference there, $10 million difference there. They both have agreed to $3.9 million more for psychiatric medical institutions for children. You might hear them called PMICs. And that's like almost a 28% increase in their reimbursement rates. And those are places, they're places where kids live that are for the more challenging children. So I don't think they've had a reimbursement rate increase for a long time. $2 million increase in the House for home health providers. $1.1 million in the House budget for taking more kids off the children's mental health waiver waiting list. So those are all in the on the House side. So there's some big differences in those budgets, but some really good stuff in there. I did want to make one note. Some of you may have recalled that when the federal ARPA, that new federal plan, the American Rescue Plan Act, I think is what it's called, ARPA they call it. When that passed, it had a 10% increase in home and community-based services Medicaid rates. This one that the House is proposing and the Senate is proposing is separate from that. So it'll be a permanent increase. The ones that were in that federal plan are temporary. I think it's 18 months. And also the state has to apply for that. So after session, I'm going to be working with some of the Medicaid folks to find out what their plans are on that, because certainly I don't think any providers want to see us not apply for that. Even if it's temporary, I think there's a lot of people saying they'd like to at least give their direct care workers some extra money, since they've been really working hard to make ends meet there, and then also maybe do some investments that will help improve the way that they work or improve some of the services that are being provided. So we'll keep you updated on that. All I know is I wanted to make sure people understood those are two separate things. So these increases in the budget are permanent, and then there would be even more of an increase, another 10% bump that would go if we apply for that. So there's a lot of money there for HCBS or home and community-based services providers. Looking at the chat here. Christina asked about if that means that they'll open up more slots for the waiver. The ID one is getting pretty long. No, this would just be reimbursement rates for existing service providers. I don't think, I shouldn't say no, I don't think that it would. specifically, the only one that the waiver waiting list is the children's mental health waiver waiting list. I didn't realize that the ID one had gotten so long. I think at one time we saw that there were 15,000 people waiting.
Yep, it's over 15,000. It's like 15,000 and some. And I agree, Amy. And I think that they continue to try to figure out where to identify and how to address and put money. And there's some immediate response that's not long-term money, so they can't pay for ongoing bills with just short-term money or 1 year or 2 year money. But I think that is, for us, that is one of our top priorities, is try to address that waiting list. So I think anything you can do to squeak about that or let people know that you're concerned and use that number to, 15,000 is a tremendous amount of people. And Brooke and we were just talking yesterday, we are going to look for people that are currently on the waiting list. If they're a family member or an individual or a person that is not receiving service, we want to know their story and put them in position to kind of advocate and make that personalized for people. Would really encourage people to talk about that. That's an area that is just really high. The other thing that you may want to follow, and I'll put this in the link, is the Hcbs Access Act that is being proposed on the federal level, which is supposed to address funds starting to follow and allowing people to live in their own community rather than maybe a larger institution or institutionalized service outside of their community. That still is in its still being created. There is a draft of it out there, so I'll try to find that here as we're talking and put it in there. But as that starts to get legs or momentum, addressing waiting list is one of their priorities. But that could be something, as that bill takes shape, gets dropped off, and we do not want to see that dropped off. So
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that far back, Christina. Thanks for letting us know. I think those kinds of things aren't filtering their way to some of the legislators. So I would encourage you to reach out to, I put in the chat 2 legislators' emails. They're the chairs of the budget subcommittee. I would definitely contact them about it, because they really are super thoughtful and very I'm sure I was going to say they're very motivated by people who are struggling in this way. So
we should clarify, Amy, that's 15,000 across all 7 of the waivers.
Yeah. But if they're going back to 11/2018 now, that's
Yeah, people are waiting three years or more to get a spot.
Yeah. Well, I did want to show you our new website design and a video, and then I wanted to have a few moments to, maybe I'm going to just jump ahead really quick, because I really do want to have your feedback for those that you might have to leave before we show the new website and the video. But why I keep doing that? Sorry. So we've had these monthly capital chats for 2 years now during the legislative session, and this year definitely we had greater participation, and I think maybe the later time that we did it. Just want to hear from you guys. Are they working for you? Do you like the time? I mean, we're kind of stuck on Fridays since that's when legislators aren't in session, but or Mondays, but have they been good formats for you? Are there things you'd suggest to improve them? And again, as Bill said, if you can't unmute yourself, just raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can put something in the chat if you want to. Great. We are talking about doing one in May. We're just not sure the date yet, May or early June, because we want to try to capture it after session's done and maybe in time to do stuff before the governor signs things. So we're trying to find and work around the holiday weekend and everything like that, and Mother's Day weekend, and try not to do it you know, when people are going to already have things going on, but we will try that. Bill and I were talking at the Capitol the other day that we'd like to have a few sort of drop-ins during this summer or fall, just to kind of get people back together and talk about anything. We might have some special guests. We had some fun ideas that we were brainstorming with legislators. You know, does that sound like something that might work out for everybody? And we can be more flexible then too. If it's not Fridays, we could do other times.
Somebody had just mentioned that sometimes they overlap with meetings. We do put them out online. It's not the same as being able to ask questions. One thing that I'd like to make, you know, the last few years, our Capitol chats, we've had about 10 to 15 people on it. And this year we've had as many as 50 on there. So we really know that we know that people really want more information. You know, one idea I had was maybe to send out an option where people can send in questions before we get started. We want it to be a chat, but when you have 30 or some people on there, sometimes people may not want to ask questions. So that might be something we add as we go forward, but we definitely want to keep the momentum going this summer and keep people informed and be a little more proactive as we go into the session next year. So.
And if I could just add for that too, Bill, and you know, if folks don't have to wait for these Capitol chats to ask questions to us, you can always reach out to the council, to Bill and I. Amy's a little bit harder to get during legislative session, but we can track her down if we don't know the answer and get back to you. So you don't have to wait for these.
Yeah, if any of you have thoughts, or even after this meeting, if you want to send them to Bill, since he just posted his email in there. If you have ideas for us or things that might be helpful, or maybe special focus sessions, like a quick workshop or something like that we can do that would help you, we'd be interested in doing that. We want to be as helpful as we can. Don't want to waste time, of course. And so if you have ideas, let us know. Most of the ideas we've had have come from advocates. I think the idea of the Capitol chats originally came from an advocate. So we continually try to figure out some things. Oh, well, somebody mentioned YouTube. I was also going to say we're going to start trying to build a YouTube library too for advocacy resources, which is kind of the beginning of this little video I'm going to show. If you have a few moments, I think it's 4 or 5 minutes long, but I might cut it off a little early, but I'm going to just play it right now because it's a really, Bill, this was up at the Capitol on Wednesday this week. So it is unedited. The volume might be a little wonky, but it's a really good video with Representative Ann Meyer, and I'm going to share that. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Bill, ahead of it.
Yeah, I just want to point out that well, you'll hear it in the video, but I'll say something at the end, and then.
Okay, I'm gonna see if I can make this bigger. Do you see it okay?
I can see it.
Okay, hopefully it's gonna work.
Meyer, on behalf of the Iowa Developmental Disabilities Council, we just wanted to thank you for all the work you've done with the Iowa Department of Transportation, changing Bill's Act, and we see it as a big step forward, allowing people with disabilities to travel and be more available to their community, but also to have that opportunity for other people visiting Iowa, people with disabilities. And so really excited about the work and the efforts around that. And just kind of curious, how did you first hear about the issue?
So I first heard about it from a gal who is in the Fort Dodge area, Amanda Milham. She has a daughter, for whatever reason, wasn't going to be potty trained. And she was getting older. And I think when Amanda first approached me, her little girl was 6 years old. And she said, you know, she's getting to the point where it's becoming a privacy and a dignity issue. We can't just throw her on the grass anymore in the back of the car when there are other people around. And she told me about this TV table that was available. So when she explained all of that to me, I have to admit, I'd never heard of anything like that before. Of course, you kind of know these issues are out there, but if you don't deal with them on a daily basis, you don't think about that kind of stuff. So the issue, I mean, it really was poignant when she showed me her daughter on the floor, a Casey's bathroom on a towel, and that's how she was changing her. And it's like, oh, I would never want to do that. And it just seemed like common sense. So that's how we originally got with the changing table idea in the legislature.
Well, we always think that's such an important thing, that personal story that kind of connects people to their legislator to say, this is something that's affecting me directly.
Yes.
Certainly. And so kind of interesting, when she approached you, what do you see your role is when someone says, hey, I have this concern, what's your role and what's their role?
My role is to listen. I mean, and be open to ideas. So she came to me with a very specific problem, and she came to me with a solution. What she envisioned the solution to be, that they should go in every business that does maybe 5,000 or more people a day. Now, my party does not like to put regulations on private business, and I knew that I would never, we're always talking about cutting regulations, but this was such an important problem. I worked with our staff and said, what can we do that as a state will pay for it? Because this is important, but without burdening private business, because they are burdened by a lot of things. So that's when we came up with the idea of putting them in a rest stop, because the state will pay for it, the state will take care of it. And really, we made it a pilot project because we thought that once there was an awareness out there, more good corporate citizens like the truck stops, Loves and Casey's on the highway, any place where there's a family bathroom, they might think about putting one in, because Target in our town does that. For instance, there was a gal in our town whose son needed a motorized cart to get around the store, and she couldn't shop without that. So she went to Target, and they did that. So Amanda came to the legislature, and we worked on the issue together, and got something done. Now, I will tell you, there's no law. We wrote the law twice. We introduced it both sessions, and again, it passed through the House 100% unanimous. So it was, everyone knows that this is an issue now, including people who didn't know it before. But since we introduced it last year, the DOT took it upon themselves to put them in a new rest stop that they were building without legislation needed. So that's the best of both worlds. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. I know it's really hard to hear. Like I said, we just got it. It was actually one of the weirdest days, because normally we don't have any background noise at the Capitol because there's nobody up there. But this day there happened to be a lot of activity, and so it's a little hard to hear. But when we edit it, we'll be able to adjust those volumes a little bit better. But it kind of gives you a little bit of a insight into how legislators think and what motivates them. And I think one of the biggest things that that Representative Meyer, who introduced this 2 years in a row and kept the pressure up, what really hit her was that visual image of a child on a bathroom floor in Casey's, and we've all been in those Casey's bathrooms, and so, we talk about your story. That's a perfect example of your story making a really big impact in a way that no lobbyist or anybody else that's hanging around up at the Capitol can do. Phil,
Amy, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just you're exactly right. And I know it was a little bit broken up there, but just to kind of hit a few high points is that she was approached by Amanda Milham, who's the head coordinator for Changing Spaces here in Iowa. She's done a number of things for the DD Council, has spoken with us for a few times at some of our sessions, but she does a lot of her advocacy on her own as well. She was a participant in the family leadership training that occurred a few years back. And I know that advocacy was a big part for her. And I think the thing that I took away from that session that Representative Meyer said, exactly what you said, was she wasn't aware. She did not know that was an issue. And she's like, I'm embarrassed that I wasn't aware, but I'm trying to address issues from people across the state. And she came to her and she said, this is a problem. And that picture stuck out in her mind. And then not only did she point the issue out to her, she had a solution. She actually had done the research and found the changing tables. And that was I wouldn't say an easy effort for her to get behind, but an inspired effort for her to get behind. And I do think that one other lesson to be learned is that it didn't get passed. And so you could say that it's a failure, but the money ended up getting into a vehicle in the Department of Transportation. And so there was a chance for that to be addressed. She also brought up to us that she knew there was a lot of other advocacy going on at Casey's and at Come and Go to let them be aware of that those changing tables, not only in the rest stops, but could be put in other bathrooms as well. So it's Amanda's story and it's Representative Meyer's story. And I know a lot of other people are part of that advocacy effort. She's not been the only one, but it's one of those squeaky wheels and progress found its way to be successful. So kind of an exciting part. And we'll clip the video up so it sounds a little better. So thank you for listening to that.
Yep, and I just want to do one last thing. I know we're running over, and but just quickly, I think we mentioned a lot of you have probably seen it. We have a new website, look, and so some of you will recognize yourselves on there. But we are trying to make it really easy to find things, and so we're going to be doing a little bit more of a tutorial at some point on the website. We're working on one for the take action to show people how to do that. Emily's working on getting a video up to show how we use that. But you can always find the current newsletter by clicking on the top on the newsletter. We'll have our current newsletter. The take action button goes right to that spot that we showed you earlier.
Amy, can you reshare your screen? We're not seeing the website right now.
Oh, sorry. Just go right to here. You see it now?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the website. Again, we'll always have some places where you can find special things here. We'll change those out. Down here, you can always get to the toolkit, the guide, legislative guide, the voting information, the bill tracker. We'll have some rolling alerts. Our social links are down here. And then also you can get to the current newsletter just by clicking on newsletter, and then you can go to the archives. If you know somebody that wants to join and get InfoNet resources, you can do that right from the site now. The calendar, these are our coffees and legislative forums and different things that might be available throughout the year. We're working on the resources section. We had a little problem when we moved it all over, but one of the new things is the videos. And so when we start building a YouTube video library, we'll be posting some of these here. But this is where you can find the Capitol chats, the previous videos of the Capitol chats and our legislative forums and some other things there. Our bill tracker, which is a kind of like when you want to go back in the middle of the summer and find out what passed, you can always go back to the bill tracker. And then we have alerts and things. I don't think we have any votes posted yet, but our archives and alerts. So just a little bit about the new website. It looks different, but we've got all the same stuff. We wanted to kind of make it look a lot like some of the other sites with ID Action and so I hope you get a chance to use it. We had our highest, an 8-year high in visitors on our website this first quarter. So it's pretty exciting. But I know we've kept you all for a while. If you end up thinking of something that you didn't think about before, go ahead and email us, let us know. Bill has his email in there, or I'm at Amy, AMY at ialobby.com. So feel free to email me too. But thanks everybody for your being here, and we will let you know when we're going to have the next one.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great Friday. Enjoy the weather.